We ready?
Ready.
Hey, Light Church. Thanks for tuning in again to another Upper Room podcast. I am Brad.
Who am I?
You are Josh.
Oh, hey.
The Bearded Bishop.
The Bearded Bishop.
So it's us two today.
I'd like to take this time to say thank you for having me on your show today,
Hey.
Brad. It's a blessing every time that I'm invited to your Upper Room podcast.
Normally you're behind the camera, but today you're in front of it, and we love having you here.
Because obviously we couldn't even fill a third seat today. So
Well, that's because Toby's getting stuff ready for baptisms this weekend, which is awesome.
Yep.
We've got baptisms this weekend, so if you haven't told anybody that you want to be baptized and this is the weekend that you want to do it, then let somebody know, because we want to get you dunked.
Yep.
As Toby likes to say it so eloquently. But he's out there getting stuff ready for that, just mowing and trimming and getting all that stuff done. So thank him for that.
Good job, Toby. Thank you.
We've got that coming up. Men's Summit is tomorrow. We're out of here tomorrow. We got people coming in from out of state.
It's true.
To go
Flying
to this
in,
men's summit with us. Yeah. And it's going to be an awesome time.
34 dudes going. 34 guys.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and I don't mean to bring this up to brag or anything, but the ladies were bragging about how many they took to the ladies retreat.
How many was that?
I think they only took like 20. It was
20.
Only like 20, which is huge.
It is.
Just the guys.
It's just not 34.
The guys just really took a whole lot more.
That's awesome, though. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yep.
So your sermon this last week was on anxiety, or freedom from anxiety, really.
Yeah.
Because God offers us freedom from everything. God has even offered us freedom from death.
Yep.
Anxiety is something that we definitely all struggle with, and I mean, it can be anything. I mean, anxiety with a new job, a new business venture, starting a church can be filled with anxiety. I mean, I'm sure that you had anxiety whenever you first started the Light Church.
Yeah. No, I mean, those anxieties can be filled from a lot of them can be like legitimate things, that you allow to turn into anxiety. I mean, like legitimate worries and fears of like, am I setting this up right? Am I doing this right? But then the enemy likes to throw other things in there, like, you're completely incapable of, being a pastor at a church, which I still feel to this day. I'm like, man, there's so many more people that are way more qualified than me. But I think that, like, that's what Satan, we talked about this in the sermon on Sunday. So if you haven't seen the sermon on freedom from anxiety, it's on our YouTube page. And one of the things that caught me off guard, because Brad and Rowdy, they kind of helped me go through a lot of my sermons and kind of give me different perspective. And one of the things that we uncovered was that the enemy is crafty, right? Genesis chapter 3, verse 1, it says that the serpent was more crafty than any of the other animals. And whenever we started reading about the word crafty, it's used another 6 times in the Bible. So it's used 7 times in the Old Testament, 1 time in Genesis, it's crafty. The other 6 times are in Proverbs, and it meant prudent and sensible. And what that means, the more that I thought about it, because it didn't just blow my mind when I was like, okay, prudent and sensible. But the more that I got thinking about it, I was like, holy crap, that is a huge thing, because the enemy, Satan, the serpent, he's crafty, but he's also sensible. So he throws crap out there, to me, like planning a church, where it was like, I know you think you've been called to plant a church, but you're way too young. No one will listen to you. You're from Jacksboro. Like, this is a waste of time. And in my mind, what I thought was, it was the enemy telling me that. It's crafty. It was very crafty, but it was also very sensible.
Yeah, makes sense.
And I was like, you know what? You're right. I probably shouldn't do this. And then, thank God, we have the Holy Spirit, right? Who's like, no. This is where I'm calling you. This is what I want you to do. But yeah, like, just planning a church like you brought up, that's an incredibly, it brought up a lot of anxiety in me that I'd never had before, up to that point. And
well, and you've owned businesses, as well, and I'm sure that there's anxiety with that. We were talking at lunch today about you going to a walkthrough at the junior high.
The schools, yeah.
22 years old, and you're doing a walkthrough with full-grown men that are there, construction businesses.
Completely feel
inadequate,
incapable, unworthy, You know, but Brad, I think that's a really good point, because God doesn't really care if we're the best at what we're supposed to do.
Well, there's the adage that God doesn't call the qualified; He qualifies
the called. Yeah, and that's exactly right. I mean, that is exactly right. So if God's calling for us to do something, He's not looking for. I'll say it again and again. Like, even in our church, I'm not the best preacher within our church, but God called me to, and so I'm going to be the best preacher that I can be at our church, right? And what that boils down to is it boils down to me putting the work in, making sure that what I'm preaching on Sunday, that I've prayed over, that I feel like I'm led to speak what I'm supposed to say. And I feel like that it's at that point where, even though I might not be the best, that God's going to bless what I'm doing, because I'm walking in what He's called for me to do. Mm-hmm. That makes sense?
It does.
Cool.
And, I mean, all of this stuff that you went over that gave you anxiety, whether it's starting the church or starting a business or going to a meeting a walkthrough at the middle school, you know, that is not the voice of God. That's the voice of the enemy. And your point one in your message was to not listen to the voice of the enemy. Yeah. I mean, the Bible talks about the Bible talks about the devil, right? A lot.
Yeah, sure does.
But it says that he's like a lion to seek, kill, and destroy.
Yeah,
right?
Running around. Yeah.
Right. But it also talks about Jesus as a lion, right?
Yeah. So
lions both roar the same, but you've got to be able to discern which area it's coming from.
Well, here's what's interesting. Jesus is the lion. Satan prowls around
like a lion.
There's a big difference in that, right? Because my son Reed, who's 3 years old going on 4, he can act like he's a grown adult, right? He can wrestle me like he can wrestle a grown man, and he can think that he is strong enough to wrestle me. There's going to be a day when he will be, right? But right now, I can still whoop him if I wanted to, right? Because I'm just a man. But that's the difference. Like Satan has a roar. He has the sound. He's not truly a lion, but he can devour us, you know. And I just think that's interesting.
It is interesting, but still, just knowing the difference between the two is huge. That's paramount.
So what's paramount too is knowing, like, kind of, maybe since we're talking about the lion, knowing the roar of which each lion, right? So Jesus, as the lion, has a roar, but Satan has a roar too, and not near as cool as Jesus. But the Bible tells us that Jesus says, "My sheep know my voice, and they listen to me." Right? So like, we need to learn how to discern what the voice and the roar of Jesus sounds like, and what the roar and the voice of the enemy sounds like. Usually the voice of the enemy is going to sound very condemning, very broad, not helpful, and you're going to feel like crap when it's over. Yeah.
It doesn't lead anywhere good.
Nope.
Whereas God's has resolution.
Yep.
The voice of the Lord is very direct, but you have a peace about it.
Yep.
I mean, I will say too that, you know, one of the things that was probably key, or is key really in anything, and this was your point too, you know, but especially you starting the church and getting things up and going, is you didn't seclude yourself from other people. You surrounded yourself, probably, if I had to guess. I mean, this was 7
with
years
all
ago.
5 people.
But you surrounded yourself with people that that fed into you, not people that told you, "Oh, that can't be done." You know?
Yeah. No, everybody. So when the church was planted, everybody that we had on was people who, like, truly believed, like, in the vision and the call that God had placed on the Light Church. So that made it a whole lot easier. And I know. So yeah, point number 2 on Sunday's message was don't seclude yourself. So that was that's a very real thing, because whenever you start to get anxiety, getting away from people seems like the answer.
Putting your head in the sand.
Yeah, like, man, I can't let anybody down if I'm not around people. And there is a big difference. I'll hit on this because I think we'll probably preach this message in a few weeks, but freedom from depression, we'll probably talk about that. But what I learned when studying about anxiety, I've kind of always made those two go hand in hand. But what I really learned is that I struggled way more with depression than I ever did with anxiety. Anxiety wasn't a thing that I really struggled with a whole lot. It is something that I occasionally really do have issues with. Absolutely, that I need to keep working on freedom from. But depression is the one for me where, like, when I was in that season, it was about 18 months where I just like ran into seclusion, right? There wasn't enough Netflix on TV that I could watch,
and
I don't.
You could bury yourself.
Y'all know all the time. Y'all talk about movies all the time, and I don't know movies. I don't watch TV. But there was, 15, 18 months where that's all I wanted to do was be secluded at my house, be in my recliner. That's all I wanted. But that's what the enemy wants. You're not getting help. You're not able to speak out loud to other people the struggles that you're going through. James chapter 5, verse 13 says, "Are any of you hurting? Then pray." It keeps going on. If you're if you're happy, sing praises. But then it goes on to say, like, if you're sinning and you're struggling, confess it to somebody. How can you confess it if you're by yourself? And that is huge. The enemy wants us alone. That way he can attack us. That way he can keep us down, take us out of the fight.
Well, there's so much power in confession too, and the entire book of James is about the power of the tongue. It talks about the tongue
all through it.
It talks about the tongue being something that it's like the rudder of a ship. I mean, it can
bridled and
it's not big by any means, but it's something that can change the direction of your life in the course of your life, the same way that a rudder can change the direction and course of a ship. So confessing to someone, there's power in our words. So saying, "Hey, I'm struggling. I need prayer," or "Hey, I'm winning. Thank you."
Yeah, thank God.
There's so much power in that.
So I don't know if you remember this, but talking about the power of our words, there was a part of the sermon where I kind of gave a challenge to our older folks in the church. I don't know if you remember that part. It was kind of brief, where it was just basically like, if you've been alive long enough to see the faithfulness of God, right, and like you've been in a tough season, an anxiety-filled season, and you made it through it, like, be the voice that actually calms the anxiety of somebody else. The way that I was speaking that was really meant for like older people, like in our congregation, to the younger people, because I think a lot of times, people hit a certain age. I'm not sure what age that is. I'm 35.
It's about 37.
It's 37 where you feel irrelevant, maybe. I'm not sure. You're 37-ish, right? So you're way irrelevant, but I'm still young. I feel like people hit an age where they go, I've kind of contributed all that I can, I don't have the energy that I used to have. I don't, whatever it might be.
I'm not even on MySpace or MySpace or Facebook, whatever.
The one, Tic Tacs. And I feel like a lot of people in that season go, "Man, I have nothing to offer." And this just kind of came out while I was preaching, but there's an entire generation of people in our church who are freaking scared to death of what is going on. Like, I don't know how I'm going to make my finances work. I don't know how my marriage is going to make it through this. I hate my job, but I can't find another job anywhere else, and I wouldn't know how. Like, there are people who are freaking out about everything, and it's the people who have been in those seasons, whether it be 30, 40 years ago, who can literally walk up to people and go, "I've been in that season that you've been in," and they can be the words, like you're talking about, that steer that ship. Like, you're going to be okay.
You might not have anything to offer but wisdom and life experience.
And praise God for that.
Seriously.
Because that is more valuable than anything. Having those words of wisdom spoken to you, of just, for me, when those are spoken to me by, like, my dad, when I'll be like, "I don't know what's going on," like, especially when I started my business, I would talk to my dad all the time, and I would just be like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I've got jobs only for the next 2 weeks, and he'd be like, "They're going to come in." Like, if God called you to start it, don't worry about it.
God's going to finish it.
And, like, I would still be, like, anxious, but there would be a peace, because I'd be like, my dad's done this before, and he says that it's going to be okay. I take a little bit of a breath, might freak out again in 20 minutes, but his voice, because he's seen the faithfulness of God over and over, calmed my anxiety in those seasons of my life. So yeah, I'm glad you brought the words up because that's a really powerful thing.
Mm-hmm. Words they are super powerful. I mean, we speak that at our house all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, anytime. I'm just trying to think of an example, but Luke will say something, you know, it'll be like, you know, oh, I can't do that or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's one thing that we say, you know, I mean, we'll tell him you can't. I mean, words are powerful. Like you're speaking that over. Like there are languages that can't and don't and things like that. They don't even exist in their language. But then another thing that we say.
That's something that only you would know, Brad.
But then there's another thing that we say, you know, like anytime we say, can't do that, that's impossible. Luke heard this one time and he'll say, the word itself says I'm possible. And so that's uplifting, man, you know, to hear that because nothing is impossible. It truly isn't. You can go out and you can crush anything that you want to, as long as God's behind you, man. I mean,
yes.
If God's called you into it, then he's going to see you through it.
Yes.
Every time.
That's the key, is that if God's in it, because, you know, what did Jesus say? With man, or God, I'm getting it all mixed up in my mind. With God, all things are possible.
Mm-hmm.
With man, things are impossible. With God, all things are possible.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about Jireh in Luke chapter 8. We're going to be talking about that this coming week.
Mm-hmm. And
when Jesus would tell him, you know, he basically told him, he said, have faith. He was actually just saying, don't stop believing.
Mm-hmm.
And don't stop believing that God is in control. Don't stop believing that God can still do a miracle here. When God's a part of it, he can do some amazing things. People just give up on it.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
he can do amazing things like call down fire from the heavens to dry up the water and smoke the wood and everything. And that's one thing. We talked about this briefly. I don't remember if you brought this up in the sermon or not, but that Elijah went out to die, right? I know you talked about that, but he did that right after a huge win. Yeah. And then anxiety sets in. Yeah. Like, just because you've won a battle doesn't mean that that it's over.
No.
Like, the enemy is constantly going to attack 100% of the time, especially if you win a battle.
Yes.
Because it might be when you're at your strongest in your faith, but it's the easiest time to come in and take that victory out from underneath you.
Yeah.
And say, just because this happened doesn't mean that you're still not qualified.
We were talking in the hallway right before we came in here, and we were talking about the phrase, sometimes things just seem too good to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, like, the way we were talking was, or the way I was talking was, we just kind of almost just wait for the letdown.
Mm-hmm.
Like things seem to be good, so when's it going to get bad?
Mm-hmm.
And there's kind of a lot of that taking place with Elijah. Almost, I kind of read into it because a lot happens just within a couple verses of, this is an amazing high that Elijah's on, and then all of a sudden he's running for his life and he wants to die. Like, that's all within 5 or 6 verses.
Yeah.
Bam, all this takes place. So you have to really read into a lot of it. But the way that I read it is that it was like this high, and he kind of got to where it was like, it's just too good to be true. And when she said that, you know, hey, by this time tomorrow you're going to be dead, that was kind of Elijah's key to go like, yep, there it is. It was too good to be true. Just waiting for the letdown. But people let us down all the time, so we're always ready for that to take place. You know, if you've been let down your whole life, then why would God not let you down too? Like, that's what people think, but he won't.
Yep.
Right.
But that's, Elijah made the fatal error, which was point number 3 of listening to the enemy.
Look at you, man. I like how you walk through all 3 of those. Yeah, he let his emotions win, you know, and that was a hard one for me to preach because I'm a very emotional person. Like, I'm very emotional, and it's really easy for me to let my emotions win. And I think Elijah had a different set of expectations of what he thought was going to take place. I really think he's a prophet of God. I'm not a prophet, so like, I'm not claiming to be that, but I just know that being a pastor, a person of faith, wanting to see our community changed, and like a powerful way, praying for revival all the time, that you pray for those moments, like, God, would you send revival? God, would you revive our community, unite us and revive us and reach it, do all these things. And I feel like Elijah had just seen this fire call down from heaven, and he thought, I feel like he truly thought, this is the moment that this happens, that revival takes place. Mm-hmm. And then it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. And he let his emotions win. Says, okay, if it wasn't going to happen then it's not going to happen at all. I'm done. Mm-hmm. And he gave up.
Mm-hmm. Which is easy to do. I mean, we're emotional beings. Yeah. Even if you don't show it very much or very often, I don't show my emotions very often, but internally, there's a roller coaster in here, but I'm not going to let that. I'm not going to,
That's good to know. I didn't think you had any emotions.
Yeah. I cover them,
Yeah.
But even a pragmatic, well calculated person is emotional, mm-hmm. and sometimes we are run or led by our emotions.
Yeah.
And depending on what's feeding those emotions, that
who's
depends.
Feeding them? Yeah.
Who's feeding them? That depends on where that kind of goes.
Yes. Wow. So that's why it's important to have people who are going to feed positivity, or maybe not even positivity, truth.
Join a small group today.
Oh, nice. So feeding, not positivity. You don't need people just always feeding positivity into your life, right? I mean, it sounds great, affirming you, but you need people that are going to speak truth into your life.
For real.
So that's a pretty important thing if your emotions get the best of you. And then just reading the Word. Mm-hmm. Man, I was reading Psalm 51 today about David, and he's just committed these terrible sins, and he's just praying this, and he prayed this prayer, and he said, Holy Spirit, don't leave me, don't depart from me. Mm-hmm. And the more I thought about that, I was like, wow, it was like David was so scared that God was going to leave him after his sin. Mm-hmm. That's he's like, I deserve it, I know I do, but please don't leave me. Oh man, that's so powerful to have the Word, to read that and to be like, God didn't leave him.
Well, the beauty in that is that we view God through our human eyes, mm-hmm. right? The way that we think and act and things like that. And God is something that we'll never understand, at least here probably.
No.
But God won't leave you.
Yeah.
The Bible's very clear about that God is always there. Mm-hmm. Jesus is knocking,
Revelation 3:20, yeah. Wow. Yeah. So I think that that's really important with your emotions, is just knowing your emotions can get the best of you, and the enemy will try to speak words into you and be like, you sinned too bad. Mm-hmm. You can never come back from this. But when I just read that with David, it was like, his emotions were flared up. Emotions were huge, but he was still grounded enough to go, okay, just, whatever takes place, fine, but please don't take your Holy Spirit away from me. Mm-hmm. And that's just such a powerful thing, to be grounded enough with your emotions to know when you need to really key in and pray and read the Word. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Kind of talked in circles on that one, but just let people speak truth into your life and read the Word.
Mm-hmm. Well,
it's going to help your emotions.
The Bible's the map.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible's what shows us this is how God speaks. This is and it makes the voice of God more clear to you. The more that you delve into that, and the closer you become to God, the more you hear from God. And I don't even know if it's the more you hear from God. I just think it's the clearer His voice comes to you.
Yeah. I always compare it to, of course, I read it in a book.
Big reader.
Yeah, big reader. I read lots of books. There's a book by Robert Morris. Mm-hmm. He did a sermon series on it called Frequency, all about tuning your ear and how to hear God. And there's different ways that you can, but that's kind of always what I refer to when people are like, how do I hear from God? It's kind of like that radio dial, on those old radios where you dial them in and you can kind of start to hear, and then you start to really hear what's coming through on that channel. But the more that you kind of twist it back and forth, you dial it in and understand the audio is clear when you really get it dialed in. and you know exactly what the radio's saying. And that, to me, that's kind of how I tell people, like when we're hearing from God, is the more that you dial it in, the more that you hear Him, you know what you're looking for, and you can dial it in, and then He just speaks.
Yeah,
He speaks all the time.
There's a ton of different stations too. So you might be hearing the wrong one.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
And they're not all bad. Like, it's not that they're all bad, but you want to be tuned into the right one.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like you said, hearing truth sometimes. Sometimes truth hurts, but sometimes truth is exactly what you need to hear in order to move forward. You know, so that is big, and you get all that through small groups.
Wow,
you really do, because you surround yourself. You're not secluding yourself.
Yeah,
you're getting around a group of people that truly love you. You know, and I mean. And they feed into your life, and they feed you physically as well, which is awesome. Part of small group food. Also.
Yeah, we share a small group. So I mean, Brad is my leader of my small group. So Brad is Mr. Miyagi to me. So it is really cool. Our small group. I remember there just being a moment in our small group where I kind of like it just kind of clicked where I was like, wow, I have my own people. Like that care about me. And I don't know if it had already clicked with them or not, or maybe it still hasn't, but like I just remember at one point going, holy crap, I can tell these people things and they care about me and they pray for me and they get excited for me when I'm excited. Like we tell prayer requests and praises all the time, and it's like the group is so incredibly excited whenever prayer requests are answered, and like people genuinely do care. And there are people, and there's times whenever, you know, Sandra's saying a lot of cuss words in the middle of our small group, and we have to be like, you need to chill out. But, you know, Bethany has been known to drop a few.
Well, I wasn't going to bring her into this, but yeah, she did it too.
I will. But it's because, like, it's real life, and people really are struggling with things. And after Bethany and Sandra have their cuss words that they throw down, and we have to, like, tell them to repent, that's when, like, the group comes together with them and goes, man, like, I'm so sorry that you're dealing with that. Everybody, let's pray.
And then healing takes place.
Some of them, like, the next day or that day, like that night.
Within the week. I mean, a lot of times we'll have our small group meeting the next week, and we go over prayer requests, and just to hear how the Lord moved in everyone. Over the course of that week, and not even just seeing, you know, prayer requests that have been answered or anything like that, but also to look at physical changes on people and their demeanor and their countenance and how they present themselves, their confidence. Like, there's physical change that's happening.
Yeah, you're right.
It's true.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love our small group. I imagine that everybody else's is great too. Like, I'm not saying ours is the only one. Like, if you're not in a small group, just make sure they put you in ours so that you have a good group.
No, get into a small group.
Get into a group. It's going to be great. We have some awesome leaders. Every one of our small group leaders is awesome. So
who are the leaders?
Yeah, so you, Bethany, Toby and Laren, Justin and Shelby, Jeff and Ashley Vick, Jack and Ashley, and Lance and Krista, a quarter. So I think there's 6 groups right now. Probably going to be a 7th one pretty soon. If I'm being honest, probably could be an 8th one pretty soon, just because there has been so much growth in them. Either way, there's a place for everybody. And kids, we have at our small group, how many kids do you think we have on a Wednesday night?
About
15, 20? Yeah, 15, 20?
Yeah, I'll say 15 to 20, but 18 to 20 is what I can say.
Yeah. There's kids running, like, everywhere. So if you got kids and you're like, man, I can't go. Some of them, you know, like Krista and McWhorter, she's got a baby. And I think Mikey and Chris are in their group, so they have a baby as well.
Krista has 2 babies.
Well, Krista's got a pretty fresh baby right now.
And Lance.
Baby Judah. Oh, yeah, baby Judah and Lance. So, I mean, like, no matter what season of life you're in, there's a place. You know, we've got some, what I call seasoned adults in ours who are incredibly helpful.
And a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, Gary was dropping some nuggets at our last one when he started talking about Psalm 22, and I was like, it just gives me chills, But like you hear those people who've been through it, and you hear them speaking that, and like I said, it's encouraging. Like they've seen the faithfulness of God,
and we're seeing the faithfulness of God. Before too long, we will be the gray-haired people that get to feed into the young bucks.
Bro, I'm looking at your beard right now. Get some gray in there.
Yeah. But other than that, man, I mean, we thank you for tuning in. We love you guys, and we'll see y'all on Sunday. Well, the men, we'll see you guys tomorrow. Yeah, all 34 of you. And then we've got, like I said, baptisms. Small groups are tonight, and if you watch this before this evening and you haven't joined a small group and you want to get involved, then just reach out to someone and we'll get you plugged into one. Yeah, go to the website. That way we can show them exactly where to go. You can go to the website, which is thelightchurchjacksboro.com, thelightchurchjacksboro.com. And then there's a link up on the header, and you can click gatherings. I think it says gatherings. Small groups or gatherings. Click that, fill out a form, and we get it right away. If you wanted to go tonight, you could get plugged in and go to one tonight if you wanted to. So, cool. But thank you guys for watching, and we'll see y'all Sunday, and then we'll see you next week. Yeah, that's awesome.